Well, hello and welcome to Access 2013, part of the Office 365 suite. Now you may be wondering to yourself, what really is Access? Well, it's a database. In this course, we're going to talk not only about Access itself, but spend a little bit of time talking about what a database is. How can a database help you? Why are databases that ethereal, perfect place to put your information? So we're going to cover how to set up an Access database, how to get data into that Access database, how to get data back out of that Access database, because obviously it's a data store. It's going to be storing information. How can I get that information back out? So we're going to kind of work our way through from the fundamentals all the way through just what the elements of Access are. Now in the intermediate and the advanced course, we'll start taking those things, getting into more custom, more detailed applications, and then really try and take a look at what's the bigger picture. How can I use Access to really help me do something with my life, whether it's managing my CD collection to running my multi-million-dollar business. So let's go ahead and get started with Access 2013. All right, so where do we start? Where do we go digging into Access from? Well, let's first take a minute and talk about databases in general. Now, what is a database? A database is really just a collection of data. It's really all that it is. But what makes it special is the fact that it interrelates data from one element to another, to another, to another. It's called a relational database, meaning that this element on this particular area relates to this. Now, it could be that this relates to multiples. Those things that I'm talking about are nothing more than really Excel spreadsheets. They are data tables. And data tables are arranged in two-dimensional. They got rows and columns. But what makes it nice is you can take those relationships and you can build forms to access that data, to look at the data differently. You can query all of this data and pull up information based on criteria. You can do calculations, you can do filters, you can do all kinds of additional functionality, but not just with one spreadsheet, but how the data relates across multiple spreadsheets. Now, what isn't a database? Well, a database is not something that's going to be your savior. It's not the easiest thing in the world because there's a lot of different moving parts that we've got to make sure we're aware of. If you just want to track some data, a spreadsheet may be the best. Your Excel spreadsheet could do wonders for you. But if you have a lot of data that's interrelated, for example, I've got a whole bunch of customers, I've got a whole bunch of salespeople, and I've got a whole bunch of timesheets. Well, I can interrelate those so that I can put all of my customer information in one place, my salesperson information in another place, and my time tracking in a third place, and just link those data points together to be able to pull the information back out of it. So a database really is just a collection of data. What Access allows us to do is to take that collection of data, well, any database really, and begin to use it in a way that's much more than just, this is the information I have in my sheet. I can start doing analytics. I can start doing things like, okay, if I click here and pick the salesperson, it'll fill in all their information, and then I can enter this and it fills in the customer's information. Then I can fill in the information. So it's doing a lot of lookups for me automatically based on the information that's in each of those disparate tables. So really that's kind of the basis for what a database is. Access is just one application of a particular database. So let's go ahead and get started with Access and talk about what I'm going to see when I launch an Access database. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and launch Microsoft Access. Microsoft Access is a little bit different in that when it launches, it gives us an opportunity to choose the kind of database. I can't just open blank unless I choose it. It's not like word processing where it actually brings up a blank page for me, or Excel where it brings up a worksheet for me. Access is going to ask me a couple of questions first. It's going to say, okay, do you want a custom web app? Do you want a blank database? Because the thing to remember about this is a database is not just one thing. A database is a collection of things. That database is going to contain tables. It's going to contain queries. It's going to contain reports. It's going to contain forms. So this one database that we're creating is going to have lots of elements within it. So it's got some samples here. These are basically templates that are available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a brand new blank database. When I do that, it asks me for the name. Remember, I'm creating an object here that contains lots of different elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this sample database 2. And I'm going to say create. And what I get is I get the Access interface window. Now it should look relatively familiar to any of the other Microsoft products that we've had. What Microsoft has done is they've done a really good job of making the interface look consistent, meaning I have tabs across the top. On the tabs I have groups, and in the groups I have tools. Now down here is my actual window that I can see. So let's take a moment and talk about the different elements that are on this screen. Obviously I have a quick launch toolbar. This quick launch toolbar gives me a place to quickly get to some commonly used tools. Things like undo, redo, and save. We're going to find out later that save doesn't always mean save, because saving the object will save the elements within that object. But you can also save each individual element independently. So I could be working on something and save that table, or work on something and save that query. Okay, so that's the quick launch toolbar. I get my table, the file name up here across the top. Then I get to the actual tabs that I have. Now my home tab has some tools on it. Obviously we're going to have a different view tool. Now the view in Access is a little bit different. If you've been through the Outlook course, if you take a look at the PowerPoint course or the Word course, the views are really different ways of looking at the same information. Views in Access are a little bit different. You basically switch between the data and the configuration, looking at the data and customizing the way it looks. Kind of, it's like a work view and an actual view, or an edit view and a preview view. Kind of same concept. But we'll go through that as we go through Access. Then I can switch over to my Create tab. Now my Create tab is where we're going to start talking about the different elements or objects within my database that I can create. You'll notice that I can create tables. Like we said before, tables are those data stores. It's where data is actually stored. I can create a query, and a query is basically a request of the database, pulling information back out. How do I get that information back out of the database? I can create a form. A form is a way that I look at the data. Now I can use a form to view data that exists, or I can even use a form to input data to make it easier for me to get that information in. And we're going to walk through that one here in just a little bit. Or I can create a report. So the four main elements that I'm going to be talking about as we go through Microsoft Access are tables, queries, forms, and reports. And we're going to see that we're going to be able to create a bunch of those. Then of course we have macros and we have code. Macro and code are very synonymous. A macro is a recorded set of steps, and it uses Visual Basic or VB script for actually how it uses and how it creates those macros. So if you are comfortable with the way that VB script is written, you can actually go in and write your own modules, write your own code to have Access to do some things you want it to do. One of the values of Access, and the reason it's been adopted by a lot of people, is there's what's called extensibility. You can actually customize this by actually writing code to have it do things that Access doesn't normally do. Okay, so that's my Create tab. I can talk to external data. I can get data in. I can bring data back out. My database tools, this is where I talk about the relationship, dependencies. And then I have additional tabs that are available now. Why? Because I'm in a table. Just like you should have seen with some of the other Microsoft products, if I'm looking at a particular type of object within my window, I may get additional tools that are specific to that particular type of object. So for example, if I'm working on a query, I'll see query tools. If I'm working on a form, I'll see form tools. In this case, I'm working at a table, so I have table tools. They're fields and tables. Okay, but overall, that's the structure of what we got here for our tool sets. Now down here on the left and here on the right, we have our main windows. The left one is a navigation pane, and in my navigation pane is where I'm going to see all of the objects that I have within this database. So it's going to show me all my tables. It's going to show me all my queries. It's going to show me all my forms and all my reports. And it actually creates separate headers for each one of those. What I can do is I can actually collapse this, and you'll notice that when I collapse it using the double chevrons, it actually calls it the navigation pane. So we're going to come back and talk about this. I like to leave it open so I know what objects are actually in my database. And then over here on the right is my main content window. It's here that I'm going to see the main content for my object, for my tables, for my reports, for my queries. I do want to let you know that because it's a tab layout, I can actually have multiple windows open and switch between them. So if I do have 3 tables and 2 queries and I've got a form, I can actually have all of those open in my main contact window, and I can switch between them by clicking over here, or there'll be tabs across the top, and we'll see that as we move through today, that I can switch between them that way as well. Then down here, we have our view area. So I can see that I've got my datasheet view and I have my design view. Just like a lot of other applications with the Microsoft Office 2013 suite, I have the views and the tab and the toolbar, but I also have it down in the bottom right. Just remember, that's pretty common. It allows you to switch. Whatever you're more comfortable with, you can do moving forward. Okay, there is a whole nother area that I want to make sure that I focus on, because you will see it in a lot of the areas that I work through in Access. And that is this record indicator. A new term that is introduced in a database structure is a record. A record is nothing more than a row. If you think about an Excel spreadsheet, you have rows. So when we start talking about tables, we will have fields, which are columns, and we will have records, which are rows. And a record is just the data for all the different fields that I have identified. This navigator down here at the bottom allows me to rotate through each record in a particular table, or each record in a particular form. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, and there are some other ways that we can apply that. So overall, that's the window that I've got, and we're going to be working through all these different tools that you see here as we start to create our first database and start to apply all those different objects to that particular database.